not aware of exactly their security posture. Okay, so I just want to highlight the agenda. The agenda itself is I'm going to talk about who we are. The next part of the agenda is that the easiest hack is often the most effective. So we're talking phishing here, like email hack, which still to this day is amongst the most effective hacks there is in the cybersecurity world. Then I want to talk about two real life examples. One of them being a transport company based here in Australia, and another one is a leading global cybersecurity company that's based in the United States. And what we'll talk about after that is what can you do? What can you do when it comes to your supply chain, and how to vet them, or how to how to respond to potential cybersecurity threats when it comes to your supply chain. And we'll end it with questions, just general questions in regards to what we have learned in this presentation so far. So I'm going to jump on to section 1, which is who we are. All right, so that's a photo of me. That's what I look like. And I just want to talk about myself briefly, and also the company Cyberlorian. So Cyberlorian, I'm a co-founder of Cyberlorian. There are 3 of us, and Cyberlorian was created in 2020 in response to the growing urgent need for cybersecurity services to local and small medium business. We realised collectively, there's a market segment there that's not really being serviced. That's a mistake. Serviced by the major players in the industry. So, from my network and from my partners' networks, we speak to people who are working for small to medium-sized businesses, and their cybersecurity posture is quite weak or non-existent sometimes, and so we wanted to help those groups out. And also, just very quickly on this as well, I've spent a lot of time in the last, say, 3 years, especially during COVID and just before COVID hit, of small to medium-sized businesses being ransomed, ransomware, and having their databases locked up and helping them out. So there is a growing need there for that size business in Australia. Now, who I am, my name's Peter Vucic. Effectively, I've been working in cybersecurity since the year 2000, more or less, since I left university. Whilst I was at university, I worked part-time at a university, and first cab off the rank, first job I had was at ANZ Bank. Now, I was a security architect there. I worked at Oracle, I worked at National Australia Bank, Westpac. I had my own company previously called Secure Dome. I've worked at Okta as well, so I've been at Okta for a number of years. And now I've co-founded Cyberlorian. Other highlights: I've been vetted by the Australian government, so you guys can look that up. So I've got baseline security clearance. I worked on some interesting projects before, like I worked on Identrust, which was a Swift competitor. I can talk about that for hours. I really enjoyed that. I set up a bank in China. ANZ Bank bought a controlling share of a bank called Shanghai Rural. So I understand the complexities in dealing with some Asian countries like China. It was really interesting, the work I did there. Worked on the Royal Bank of Scotland acquisition throughout Asia Pac, and I worked heavily using APIs. So recently, what I have seen, and what people on this call would have seen, is, say 10 years ago, it was all defense in depth and protecting a database with multiple layers of firewalls and reverse proxies and so on and so forth. So, but now things have changed. So banks are opening up their data to the outside world using APIs. So effectively, using APIs and using global standards like OAuth 2 or SAML. You can make a call to an ANZ API to retrieve your account details or things of that sort. So it's quite interesting to see how the arms race when it comes to banking has changed. But not only banking, and superannuation, universities, all of them are following the same pattern. Is instead of locking down their data, they are opening up the data to the outside world. It's quite interesting how things are going. All right, so I want to talk about the easiest hack in the world. We've all got these emails. I still get these emails. I get emails sometimes from from Australia Post, and I nearly got caught on one actually. Because during COVID, we were buying a lot of things online and they were being delivered. I've got so many Australia Post emails saying my delivery's been delayed and so on and so forth. So they are still effective. Even myself, I nearly got stooged by one because I was waiting for a delivery on a new keyboard from overseas for a long time, and it nearly got me. So let's talk about let's talk about your organization. So you have your organization, it could be a small business, medium business, or a large business. And, as a large organization or a medium organization, and if you're a cybersecurity aware, you would almost certainly have gone through the process of making your organization secure, cybersecurity wise, of course. So you feel secure with your organization. You probably have single sign-on set up. You probably have a multi-factor authentication set up. You probably have training of your staff, and you have a lot of existing cybersecurity controls. And so from a high level, this is your house and you feel secure. So you don't really think about the outside world as much because we are locked down, we are secure, and we are happy. But now you got to think about your supply chain, right? So an example of your supply chain is, from the customers that we Cyberlorian deal with, the supply chain can be an MSP, someone who looks after your network, or someone who looks after your Office 365 environment, or someone who looks after your website, and so on. So I have examples there on the screen. We've got billing, payments, electronic health as an example, website hosts and designers, I've mentioned, cloud providers, and can also be raw material providers as well. It doesn't necessarily have to be an MSP. It can be anything. And if you look at that quote there, I have a quote in yellow from Accenture. It's 2020, but it's still very relevant. This came out in late 2020, this report, but it shows that, indirect attacks against weak links in a supply chain now account for 40% of security breaches. And I believe it's grown from 40%. I think it's higher now. I can't quantify that, of course, but I think as we progress in these slides, I'll show you why. And think about this as well. You're secure, that's great, but is your supply chain, and your supply chain partner, your third-party provider, could have its own supply chain, and then they in turn could have their own supply chain as well. So if you think about it, protecting your entire ecosystem, with using traditional, controls and so on, probably doesn't exist anymore. And you really need to think about your supply chain, your third-party providers, as a brand new attack vector to your organization. Okay. All right. So what we're talking about here is the weakest link. And I hate using that term because it's a famous quiz show on, I think, on Channel 9 or something, or Channel 7, I'm not even sure. But when it comes to supply chain, you've got to think of it holistically about everything. So that can be like raw materials, it can be a supplier, it can be a production, it can be distribution, it could be a customer, it could be marketplace, right? So if your organization relies on raw materials, what would happen if you couldn't get wood delivered because they were hacked and they've gone bust? What happens to your organization? What happens if one of your suppliers of computers is being ransomed? What does it mean? You've got some critical patching needs to be done because there's a vulnerability in Linux, for example. What happens if your supplier is being ransomed and they can't release a critical patch to you, for example? What happens if your production of bumper bars for your mini miners? So I don't say you repair mini miners and you're leading Australian mini miner car repair company. What happens if there's no more bumper bars available for an old car? Distribution, same thing. Customer, same thing, and so on. What would happen if one of the organisations as part of your supply chain can't supply you anymore, or are hacked, or are ransomed, and it filters back to you, to your organisation? So they're the things to think about. All right, so I just want to go through at a high level, what happens when it comes to attacking supply chain from a hacker perspective. So from a high level, most hackers obviously will target your main organization. So you have your main organization. We already spoke about that, and your main organization is secure. You've got MFA, you've got SSO. It's locked down. You've got a really good Azure environment that's completely locked down, which is wonderful. Or you might use Okta, or you might use OneLog or one of the other vendors out there. So they'll target your main organization, and they'll quickly discover. They'll attempt phishing, they'll attempt social engineering, and they'll determine what kind of defenses you have in place. So you have a lockdown Azure environment, and they'll know, okay, hacking into your main organization is probably hard, almost impossible. It's not unheard of though. They still might try and attack you, but we're talking about here using phishing, using a very simple email to attack. So they'll just skip your main organization. And what they're going to do next is start effectively doing a reconnaissance of your third-party vendors. So a very common one is that they'll target an MSP, and another very common one, when I say MSP, someone like, there's an organization that looks after your Office 365 environment. So they'll target them. They'll start looking at them, see what kind of cyber defenses they have. So that's a good one. That's a very common one. And another very common one used a lot by hackers is third-party vendors that do content management. So there's third-party vendors that look after your website, your content, right? So that's a very, very good target for hackers, and they will definitely find out who your content management organization is and start targeting them. Because it's an easy, very simple attack to do. They're going to just try and phish them and send out emails, right? So, to those third-party vendors. And so stage 3 is they're going to attack, they're going to spoof emails. Emails are very easy to spoof, and you can send them out automatically, so it's fine. So I've highlighted 4 main ones, but if you note there's spoof of business emails. So they'll send test emails to your third party saying, hey guys, I need a password reset, or hey, I need an account set up, and so on. So that's one example of that. Another example is hackers will go have a look at open source tools. There's a lot of open source groups out there that's freely available, which will show you the latest hacks that are available, or latest attack vectors. So they will look at publicly available vulnerabilities. So a good example of this is WordPress. And WordPress uses a lot of plugins, and some of the plugins can be antiquated, and some of those antiquated plugins can have security vulnerabilities in them, right? So they'll look at that, and they'll know, okay, if I'm a content management third-party organization, a hacker will try and work out, all right, so they have access to WordPress, what plugins are they using, and so on. That's an example of that. Another way of doing it is using a compromised website or clicking an email link. And this is so simple. It's like a phishing email, and this is a good one for targeting IT support staff. So you may have outsourced your support to a third party. And the idea of this is to send a really cool looking email and getting them to click a link. And what happens then is like a support engineer, for example, could accidentally install malicious code, and then the hackers would just sit and wait and just gather data of the unfortunate support engineer and try and retrieve things like usernames, passwords, or even record their activity. Another really good one, another interesting one, which hackers are targeting. I'll talk about this just a little bit later on as we progress in this presentation. Is Internet of Things. So Internet of Things are things like devices, like fridges, and security systems and cameras and so on and so forth. So Internet of Things like a fridge or a TV or a security camera often have lockdown operating systems which you can't have access to, and they're very hard to patch, and they're very hard to open, and they're very hard to fix, and so on. So they're like a lockdown environment effectively, and and some of those are up to 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 or 9 years old or 10 years old, and you might have a security camera running in your house, and it has a massive vulnerability in it, and it's easily hacked because it runs an old version of Linux, for example. So that's a target as well. And these are the things, the impact to your organization or the third party organization. So this is the impact to the third party, and in turn potential impact to you, right? So what happens is once they attack the third party, they can attempt extortion of your organization. They can attempt ransom. They can go through account access removal. They can try data destruction. They can try encrypt your data manipulation, defacement, disk wipe. They can do a ton of things once they have managed to attack the third party, and once they have once they have retrieved enough information, especially if they have access to your, like a support engineer, for example. Okay, there's a lot of things they can do, and it has nothing to do with you. This has come from your third party. So you're nice and secure, but your third party's been attacked, your third party's been compromised, and the impact to them can potentially also impact your main organization. Okay. I want to go for a couple of real life examples. I've found this one really interesting. So I'm going to talk about a local transport company. Now, oops, sorry, that's my fault. I've gone up instead of down. So Socky. So we're talking about a local transport company. It's not a massive company, it's big enough though. But when it comes to things like transport, and if you look on the right there, there's a whole bunch: banking and finance, defence, health, water, etc., etc. Even though it's a small to medium-sized business, they still have to adhere to the Security of Critical Infrastructure Act, which is an act that has been set up by the federal government, and there's certain obligations that an organisation in transport needs to adhere to. So, and some organisations like this one, who've been in business for years and years and years, probably don't even realise that they have to adhere to these kind of acts. Yeah. Okay. So it is part of the Critical Infrastructure Act. All right. So we're Cyberlorian. This is a transport company, and obviously they're part of a transport industry. And I already mentioned that being part of the transport industry, they need to adhere to SOCI, Security of Critical Infrastructure Act. Now, what happened was that the customer engaged us, and they wanted us to evaluate their overall cybersecurity position. As always, we're all security professionals on this call. Well, a lot of us are. It always starts with a risk assessment or a cybersecurity assessment. So what we did, we had a couple of meetings with them, and then we did a cybersecurity assessment, right? And then we worked out where they were weak in, where they were strong in, where they needed things looked into, where they should be within 6, a 3-month period, a 6-month period, a 12-month period, and longer. So this led to the introduction of single sign-on. It also led to the introduction of multi-factor authentication. We got all staff, all of them, not just head office staff, not just the people who control the money. Everyone in the organisation was trained in cybersecurity. We created a cybersecurity owner, effectively like a CISO, a chief information security officer for the organisation. We set up cybersecurity documentation, and we also audited the third-party providers. Like they had a couple of MSPs. We spent time with them, and we worked out how secure they were, and so on. So I really enjoyed this engagement. I thought we did a fantastic job. I felt quite chuffed by it. I've done a lot of massive projects, internet banking, mobile banking platforms, universities, and so on. And this is one of my favourite ones in that we really helped them. We made them realise the importance of cybersecurity. We made them far more secure from when we walked in there, and we introduced a whole bunch of fantastic controls to their organisation. So they certainly, when we finished that engagement, they were in a much better and a much safer position than they were when we walked in there. So it was great. It's a really good engagement. So a very successful engagement with this transport company. But then what happened? Well, there was a forgotten third party. As I said, we spoke to all the third party providers. But what happened many months later, the customer reached out to us and mentioned that their website got hacked. And after initial discussion, we suspected it may have occurred through like the content provider. I've mentioned it a few times already. And then we organised, for them, we organised a vulnerability scan, a penetration test, and we discovered that malicious code was being injected into the website through a third-party provider, username and password, as well as a WordPress plugin they were using was vulnerable, was old and vulnerable. And the other thing we discovered was that the third-party account also had elevated privileges. Now, the outcome of this was, we acted really quickly on this. We were able to resolve it really quickly. It was really good work. Again, the outcome of this was a third-party account had its privileges reduced, so it could only update content and nothing else. And the password management of the third party was locked down, and emails weren't, passwords and usernames weren't delivered via email anymore. Okay, so we added further controls, and you got to understand this third-party provider was the weakest link. It was a very small shop. They look after content for a lot of organisations, small to medium-sized businesses, and so on. So this was the attack vector, and you can tell. And if I hark back to the work we did, that we protected, we set up we really locked down the main organisation. You can tell that they've already been targeted. So the timing was really good for them to engage in us. And you could tell that they understood that the main organisation was locked down, so they started looking at the third-party providers. The other third-party providers were also secure, and they attacked the weakest link. Now, what was the impact to the organisation? Well, it was just defacement, really. The website was, I think they added some funny stuff on the website, but it was nothing major. But the scary part was that the account with the elevated privileges, that username and password was used to attempt to log into the corporation's database. Now, since it was already locked down, that was impossible because the username and password is different. Because we got them to change passwords as part of our cybersecurity risk assessment. So that was fine, but it was kind of scary in a way that the hackers were doing that. When I first looked at this, I thought it was just some script kiddies trying to deface a website and trying to publish it on the internet. But no, it was partially that, but there was actually a much more sinister overtone to that as well. Now, if I go to this slide here, I already showed you this slide, but I'll just go through for this transport company. What the hackers did. So what they did, they identified third-party suppliers and they targeted the third-party suppliers. Obviously, they probed the transport company that they worked out they had MFA SSO set up, so they're much more locked down. They identified that they're third-party suppliers. So how they did it was that they spoofed a business email and then they asked for a password reset. And also they worked out that one of the plugins was vulnerable as well. Okay. And the impact to the organisation ended up just being a bit of defacement of the website, and that was rectified really quickly. Luckily, there's no other data destruction or data encryption, which would have been a completely different level, but it was just defacement. So just to sum up, just to sum this up at a high level, the weakest link out of the entire supply chain was a small company that did website updates, and the impact to the organisation was defacement, but could have been much worse. Okay. All right. So that's a small to medium-sized transport company here in Australia. Now let's talk about one of the leading global cloud cybersecurity companies, and just think about it. Just think about the email. Think about this this whole, what this presentation is about. It's about phishing. It's about emails, and it's about, often the easiest hack is the most simplest hack. So let's just go through a real life example of what happened in January this year and was announced in March this year. So we have a leading large cybersecurity company, cloud cybersecurity company, one of the global leaders in this area. just to highlight that they've had huge growth since 2019, and especially during COVID lockdowns, they just experienced massive growth, and it made sense because people were working from home, and a lot of organisations were, wanting to lock down their environments because people are working from home. So they introduced things like SSO, MFA, network, tracking, geolocation stuff and so on. So they grew through the roof. They just exploded in growth. And the hackers, obviously know of this organisation. They're one of the best there is when it comes to cloud cybersecurity. So, the hackers knew, the cybersecurity company has an excellent in-house support teams, and they were overwhelmed with work because of the growth of the organisation's support team needed to grow as well, and also a large group of the support team had left the organisation, were poached by other cybersecurity cloud cybersecurity companies. So they were poached by them. So left with a smallish team compared to what they used to be. So this happened for about a year. The response times for support activities were going longer and longer and longer. And so what this cloud cybersecurity company decided to do was to outsource level 3 support to a new third party in South America. And I mentioned South America here. It doesn't matter what country they're from. It could be Australia, it could be Tasmania, it could be New Zealand. It doesn't matter. It's irrelevant. It's just that when it comes to level 3 support, and this is very common for any organisation, not just a cloud security company, it could be any organisation, you often outsource your level 3 support. Things like reset passwords, very, fairly fundamental support activities is often outsourced, and it's a cost saving and so on and so forth. So let's talk about what happened. So what happened was 35 days into the contract. So they started, I understand, and this is online. I'm not making this up, so it's all online. It's all available for everyone on the call to see. But 35 days into the new contract, this third-party supplier based in South America that does level 3 support, after 35 days, they're onboarded and starting to ramp up. A support engineer accidentally installed malicious code onto their laptop, onto their device, to watch World Cup qualifiers. So it was a thing to watch the World Cup while they're working, and it just sat there dormant for a week or so, or a couple of weeks, or whatever it was. And what happened was the hackers recorded the day-to-day activities of their of the support engineer, and the hackers got screenshots of staff details. So so this malicious code was talking back to the hackers to a server, and it was uploading screenshots and video of the day-to-day activities of the support engineer. And the staff details they gleaned was staff details from Cloudflare. So one of the biggest infrastructure cloud companies in the world, and I believe about 5 staff members' details were in those screenshots. And then I just want to highlight the hackers couldn't get far because this cybersecurity company, it's very good. It has excellent MFA, has excellent single sign-on. The only way the hackers could have potentially been able to steal their username and password. They would have stolen the username, and they may have stolen the password for keystrokes, but they couldn't have done no damage physically because of multi-factor authentication, and they would have had to have hacked the support engineer's phone or token, which is impossible. So the damage was limited to just taking screenshots and recording the day-to-day activities, which often, believe it or not, is worse. But at least the hackers couldn't, say, for example, shut down this company or knock out a tenant, or Cloudflare's tenant, which potentially they could have if they had enough privileges. All right, so the hacker has images, the hacker has photos, the hacker has video of a support engineer. So what happened was the hackers attempted to extort this organisation, and obviously the organisation told them to get lost, which makes sense. So straight after that, the hackers come, on Twitter, on Reddit, on various social media platforms, said, "Hey, leading cloud cybersecurity company has been hacked. Here's the evidence." Bang. And that was the damage. So the damage was reputation damage. It was really bad. It was really bad. And the other damage, obviously, stock price, right? So their stock price has plummeted from from a really high mark in the middle of December to losing $100 in shares and so on. So it was horrific from that point of view. But the worst part is reputation damage. And before this cloud cybersecurity company could respond properly, there was sending various messages to via Twitter, via social media platforms and so on, that were a bit sort of convoluted. They didn't respond that well to when the hackers showed the screenshots. So they were in damage control at least, and they still are in damage control over this, but things have calmed down a lot. So they're in damage control for many weeks after that. And they lost a lot of business to Azure and other cybersecurity companies since that occurred. Now look at it holistically at a high level. So what happened was the hackers published screenshots of a support engineer. There's nothing you can do about it because a support engineer installed malicious code, and the details itself wasn't that bad. It really wasn't that bad, but there were 5 Cloudflare staff members with their first name, surname, phone number, and email address that were published on Twitter and things like Twitter and other social media platforms. So 5 staff members from Cloudflare were impacted. They probably have to change their phone numbers. Who knows? They had their phone numbers for years. And the Cloudflare CEO absolutely tore strips off the company, and he was furious. And so the damage was more definitely reputation. This company was rock solid since it started, and it did damage their reputation. So let's talk about the attack. So in Australia, a humble, small to medium-sized business was hacked through an email and was hacked through an email through a third-party provider, and through a third-party provider, that being a content management provider to a transport company. They had their website defaced, and that could have caused reputation damage, but it didn't. It was only for a few days. The damage wasn't that bad, but yeah, think about it though. There was attempts to log into their database as well, which was foiled as well. And think about this: a leading cloud security company, one of the global leaders. What happened? Supply chain again. A new contract with level 3 support. A support engineer was installed malicious code, and the reputation damage was huge. And attack vector was the same, via an email. Simple, straightforward attack that's been around since basically the birth of the internet, effectively, since the "I love you" virus in the year 2000. All right, so let's talk about what you can do, right? So I just wanted to highlight the examples are quite horrific almost, right? So whether you're a small company or you're one of the biggest organizations in the world, it doesn't matter. Think about your third party. You've got to think about your third party, and you need to think about reevaluate your third parties and how they approach cybersecurity and risk management in general. So how and when should you vet your supply chain for cybersecurity risk? So I just want to highlight, you should really start talking to your supply chain. You should undertake an in-house risk assessment. Just work out, in-house what part of my supply chain would really impact me. Is it the website? Is it the support engineer? Is it the bumper bars aren't available? That kind of thing. If a supplier is knocked out, what happens to your business? Do you stop working? Are things delayed? Can you deliver? And so on. If a supplier has access to one of your systems, what would happen? Like, let's talk about the transport company again. If the supplier was able to hack through them into your organization and steal your database details of all your customers, what does that mean? That's a massive risk. And so once you've worked out the risk to your organization, so once you've sort of mapped out, all right, this is my supply chain, my support, my support MSP is there, my website content management are these people, this organization, my plastics, deliveries come from here. So which one of those, 3 or 4 touch points is critical to my organization, right? And then you should approach the suppliers and explain to them, if you go down, this impacts my business. Do you follow the Essential 8? Are they, do you comply to ISO standards? Do you, and so on, right? And it's not, you shouldn't perhaps scare them off, horrify them. You might have a really long relationship with these third-party providers. You may have, going back 20, 30 years. Who knows? Maybe maybe the founders set up this relationship like 50 years ago. You don't know, so you can help them. You can go on the journey with them and explain the importance of cybersecurity to them. You can just help them on the journey into making themselves secure. And not only that, I mentioned before, the Critical Infrastructure Act. That may apply to them, and they may not even realise, right? And also, you should engage like cybersecurity consultants and maybe like an independent party, like when it comes to pen testing and things like vulnerability scans. You should always try and engage in independent parties, and you should encourage suppliers to undergo cybersecurity awareness training or do a cybersecurity risk assessment. I think it's very important to start talking to them about that and what it means to you if they go down. Now, I want to highlight, this might sound new, but it's not. The supply chain is, as I mentioned before, it's not a new attack vector, but people are, hackers are paying attention to it as bigger organizations or small to medium-sized businesses become more cybersecurity secure and have controls in place like SSO, NFA, just those 2 alone, and training your staff. Just those 3 things can just really protect an organization. So they start looking for your weakest link, right? And so that there's no doubt about it. It's growing. It's growing, and I saw it with my own eyes, live basically, late last year. So there are standards emerging, and a really good standard is this MITRE one that's just been released, and there is a risk assessment framework available now, and the links are there. So I suggest following that, looking at that. It's free and available. MITRE.org is a collaborative risk and security framework, and it's certainly worthwhile looking at that and perhaps using the framework that's available there to vet your supply chain. All right, so I'm at the last part here. It's about questions, so you can ask me anything you like.